Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday and a talk by Myo On, an old and dear friend and supporter of Hokyoji, now with Clouds and Water as a senior teacher, and not really having left Hokyoji as a teacher and a fan. So she's been practicing since 1980. And she started with Katagiri-Roshi and MZMC. And then she took time away from formal practice when she started raising her family in the 1990s. But then she returned in 1999 to MZMC more formally. And she was ordained by Tim Burkett in 2003. In 2010, she began practicing with Dokai at Hokyoji, and she received transmission from him in 2018. She joined Clouds and Water in 2020 and has become a senior teacher there. She still lives in Minneapolis, in a house she's probably been in for a long time with she and Duane. And they have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren who bring them great joy. So Hokyoji continues to be a place that she supports and loves. So without further ado, take it away, Myo On.
Okay then. Well, it's good to be here. It's been a while since I've given a Hokyoji talk, so happy to be here. To see all your shining faces. So this a few weeks ago, we at Clouds and Water they started this blog thing, and somebody asked me to write a blog for Women's History Month. And so I thought about it, and my mind went to Yashodhara, who is Shakyamuni Buddha's wife. And I really feel like her practice is really important to me and to women and to people who are householders who are practicing and practicing while they're raising their families and just taking care of regular everyday life and not wandering around in the woods. So, and also at Clouds, oftentimes we do a little dedication, so I'm going to do a little. And I dedicate this talk to all those who have been invisible, whose lives, though meaningful, have not had their stories conveyed to the wider world. Each person's life has something to teach us all. No matter one's racial, sexual, gender identity, economic circumstances, or place they live, let's work towards becoming aware of each other's life stories with an open heart. So the story I've heard for a long time, and I think many of us have, is that Shakyamuni abandoned his wife and newborn son in the middle of the night and disappeared and didn't say goodbye and kind of abandoned them. And it's always kind of troubling to me. That was the story, and I don't know who wrote that version of the story, but a few years ago, So-san, the guiding teacher at Clouds and Water, turned me on to this wonderful, I think it's wonderful book. It's called Old Path, White Clouds, and it's by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's basically his biography of the Buddha. And he, it's a pretty in-depth biography, and it includes um, all of Shakyamuni Buddha's important teachings, but it also includes all kinds of stories about his life from when he was born until when he died, and fills in a lot of the missing links, and also really describes a lot of the people around him and his relationships with all kinds of different people. And obviously, Yashodhara was a primary relationship in his life, and the story is told quite a bit differently than what we've heard before. And so, Thich Nhat Hanh has his sources from a sutra called the Lalitavisattara Sutra, and it was written during the early days of Buddhism, and that can be translated as the play in full. So I don't think it's had many English translations, but I know that it's been translated into Chinese, and I know that Dokai-san has said that that Thich Nhat Hanh had access to different sources that we might not have here. So I'm glad he had those sources to give us a fuller picture of who Yashodhara is. Another source for his book is Buddha Chatarita, that's by Ashvaghosha, and it's told in a lyrical sense about Shakyamuni's life, and it was written in the early 2nd century CE. And so Yashodhara was Shakyamuni's first cousin. She was the daughter of King Supabuddha, who was the brother of Mahapajapati, who was Shakyamuni's biological mom, and also of Mahapajapati, who was Mahamaya's sister, and so Mahamaya died when when the Buddha was born, about a week after he was born, and so in all senses, really, that Mahapajapati really was Buddha's mom. She raised him and took care of him and loved him his whole life. So, and her mother was Amita, and she was the sister of King Sudana. And also interestingly, Yashodhara was Devadatta's sister. And so from the beginning of their relationship, Shakyamuni was really, I'm going to move this a little so I'm looking more at the camera when I'm looking at my notes. Okay, so Shakyamuni was very inspired by Yashodhara from the teenage years when he came upon her when he was out and about in the community. And so I wanted to read you something from here. Okay. On a day as he was returning to the palace, Siddhartha was surprised to see Yashodhara in a small poor village with one of her maidservants, tending to the village children who were suffering from eye diseases, influenza, skin disorders, and other ailments. Yashodhara was dressed simply, yet she appeared to be as a goddess who had appeared among the poor. Siddhartha was deeply moved to see the daughter of a royal family placing her own comfort aside so that she could care for the destitute. She rinsed their infected eyes and skin, dispensed medicine, and washed their soiled clothes. Princess, how long have you been doing this? Asked Siddhartha. It is beautiful to see you here. Yashodhara looked up from washing a little girl's arm. For almost 2 years, Your Highness, but this is only the second time I've been in this village. I often stop here. The children know me well. Your work must give you a great feeling of satisfaction, Princess. Yashodhara smiled without answering. She bent over to continue washing the girl's arm. So, Shakyamuni saw that this young woman was different from most of the other young women, royal young women that he had encountered, and I think he was smitten from that moment on. So she seemed to have the same spiritual yearning that he had. Since the day he first saw her, Siddhartha had felt a special affinity for Yasodhara. Now he found himself drawn to every word she spoke. His father had expressed a desire that he marry soon. Perhaps Yasodhara was the right woman. During the musical and athletic gatherings, Siddhartha had met many charming young women. Excuse me. Siddhartha had met many charming young women, but Yasodhara was not only the most beautiful, she was the one with whom he felt at ease and content. There you go. In the mythological story of the two of them together, it was like they were destined from past lives to be together, and this lifetime would be their last. During the 13 years they were together before Shakyamuni departed on his quest, they shared the same path. Yasodhara continued her work in serving those in impoverished areas, and together they found ways to alleviate the difficulties of those in difficult circumstances. I'm referring to this a lot. King Sudana, that's the Buddha's father, was at peace now that Siddhartha had followed the path he had wished his son to follow. He personally selected the finest musicians and dancers in the kingdom to provide continual and pleasant entertainment for his young son and daughter-in-law. But happiness for Siddhartha and Yasodhara was not to be found in a pampered life of wealth and status. Their happiness came from opening their hearts and sharing their deepest thoughts with each other. They weren't moved by exquisite and savory foods or fancy silken clothes. While they could appreciate the artistry of the dancers and musicians, they were not carried away by the pleasures they offered. They had their own dreams to find answers concerning the spiritual quest and the renewal of society. I can kind of relate to that. I grew up in a upper middle class family, but I was never one for all the fancy stuff. As Gautama learned from prominent spiritual teachers, Yashodhara would listen in the background and soak it all in. She had a deep connection to her mother-in-law, Prajapati, who often accompanied her on her sojourns in the countryside and was a very good friend. Queen Mahapajapati was not like other women in the palace. She frequently told Yasodhara that women possessed as much wisdom and strength as men and needed to shoulder the responsibilities of society also. While women did possess a special ability to create warmth and happiness in their families, there was no reason for them to remain only in the kitchen or in the palace. Gautami found in her daughter-in-law a woman with whom she could share true friendship. For like herself, Yasodhara was thoughtful and independent. Not only did the queen offer Yasodhara her approval, but she worked alongside Yasodhara as well. I love this. The Buddha had some strong women around him, and that's the kind of female person he was attracted to. So here's a different version of Shakyamuni's departure. Okay, so Yashodhara was looking for Chana, who was Gautama's attendant and kind of his chauffeur and attendant, and did many things for him. And Yasodhara went to go look for him. He was already asleep when she found him. Yasodhara awoke him and whispered, "It is possible the prince will require your services tonight. Prepare Kantak, that's the horse, to ride, and saddle another horse for yourself." "Your Highness, where is the prince going?" "Please don't ask. Just do as I have said, because the prince may need to ride tonight." Chana nodded and entered the stable while Yasodhara returned inside the palace. She readied clothes suitable for traveling and placed them on Siddhartha's chair. She took a light blanket to cover Rahula and then lay upon the bed herself. As she lay there, she listened to the sounds of music, talking, and laughter. It was a long time before there was a party going on. It was a long time before the sounds faded, then disappeared. She knew the guests had retired to their quarters. Yasodhara lay quietly as silence returned to the palace. She waited a long time, but Siddhartha did not return to their room. He was sitting alone outside, gazing at the radiant moon and stars. 1,000 stars twinkled. He had made up his mind to leave the palace that very night. At long last he entered his chamber and changed into the traveling clothes awaiting him there. He pulled back the curtain and gazed upon the bed. Gopa was lying there. That was a nickname for Yasodhara. No doubt asleep. Rahula was by her side. Siddhartha wanted to enter and speak words of parting to Yasodhara, but he hesitated. He had already said everything that was essential. If he woke her now, it would only make their parting more painful. He let the curtain drop and turned to leave. Again he hesitated. Once more he lifted back the curtain to take a last look at his wife and son. He looked at them deeply, as though to imprint on his memory that familiar and beloved scene. Then he released the curtain and walked out. I would like to venture that maybe she was playing possum and didn't open her eyes, but knew what was happening. But it's a very different version of things than he left in the middle of the night and didn't say goodbye, and he got the feeling that he was abandoning them. So I appreciate this fuller telling of the story. After the departure, Yashodhara followed the meditative practices that Siddhartha undertook. But when he left the household, she completely lived in the household. Although she lived simply, she took care of helping run the home and raising her son Rahula. She continued to her work serving the needs of less fortunate in the countryside. More than 7 years after he left, Shakyamuni returned as the Buddha to his family home. Yashodhara instructed Rahula to ask his father, the Buddha, about his inheritance. So Buddha had brought many disciples with him. He went all over the place after he was awakened with many disciples, and they set up camp, so to speak, a bit outside of the town. Yashodhara made frequent visits to the Buddha at Nagoda Park, accompanied by the Queen and young Rahula. She listened to his Dharma talks and in private asked him about the relation between practicing the way and performing social service. The Buddha showed her how to observe her breath and practice meditation in order to nourish peace and joy in her own heart. She understood that without peace and joy, she could not truly help others. She learned that by developing deeper understanding, she can deepen her capacity to love. She was happy to discover that she could practice the way of awareness in the very midst of her efforts to serve others. Peace and joy were possible right in the very moments she was working. Means and ends were not two different things. Queen Gautami was also making great progress in the practice. So while he was visiting his family, the Buddha went to go visit children in a poor village nearby. And the Buddha told the story of a past life when he originally connected with Yashodhara, and he ended with this. Children in that life and in many lives thereafter, Megha and the young woman lived as husband and wife. When the husband needed to leave in order to pursue his spiritual path, his wife helped him in every way she could. She never tried to prevent him. Because of that, he felt the deepest gratitude toward her. At last, he realized his great vow and became a truly enlightened one himself, just as Dipankara had predicted so many lifetimes ago. Children, money, and fame are not the most precious things in life. Money and fame can fade away very quickly. Understanding love and love are the most precious things in life. If you have understanding love, you will know happiness. Megha and his wife, that's the Buddha and Yashodhara in a past life, for many lives, thanks to their understanding excuse me, Mega and his wife shared happiness for many lives, thanks to their understanding and love. Understanding and love, there's nothing you cannot accomplish. And then Yashodhara was very appreciative because she knew he was talking to her. And he said to the children, "Do you know who Mega is in this life? He is the Buddha. And in this very life, he has become an enlightened one. And do you know who Mega's wife is in this life? She is none other than your own Yashodhara. Thanks to her understanding, Prince Siddhartha was able to follow his path and attain awakening. We should offer thanks to Yashodhara." So Yashodhara wasn't invisible. She was a true partner to the Buddha. And in my mind, she has as much to teach us as he did. And so I have a couple of things to end with. So online, I guess there's a book called The Buddha's Wife. I have to get it, but I haven't read it yet. But the way it's described on Amazon is this: Princess Yasodhara's journey is one full of loss, grief, and suffering. But through it, she discovered her own enlightenment with the deep bonds of community and ordinary relationships. While traditional Buddhism emphasizes solitary meditation, Yasodhara speaks of the Yasodhara's speaks of the path of right relation, of achieving awareness not alone but together with others. One more. I know I'm using a lot of other people's things, but they echo my own thoughts. And Byakunin Judith Regier wrote an essay about Yasodhara in this book called The Hidden Lamp. That's stories from 25 centuries of awakened women. And this is in the Sarvastivadin version of the story of Shakyamuni and Yasodhara. The separation of Buddha and Yasodhara is a sorrowful event. They loved each other, but they knew that there must be a separation. Yasodhara saw in her dreams the possibility of Siddhartha's greatness. Out of life, love, and for the sake of the liberation of all beings, she let Siddhartha go. This inevitable separation may have been a heartbreaking truth for both of them. This is a great example of how a devastating loss can often initiate the spiritual journey, as many of us have experienced. What I love about this is Judith talking. What I love about this version of the story is that it honors the spiritual path of the home. Yasodhara, the one who stayed home, dug into her own spiritual life right where she was. When I first had my babies, I laughed and told all my friends, child rearing is just like going into a monastery. Everything you do is for the other, and there is hardly a moment to think of yourself. Another Buddhist teacher who was a father commented, "It's like my heart is running around outside my body. Becoming a mother completely connected me to the mystery of life. I could no longer be self-centered, and my heart burst open." I I feel the same way. So I just really feel like Yasodhara gives us another way to be in our practice. As women, as householders, as any practitioner who is living in this world, and that there's something fundamental to living and practicing in our everyday lives. And I really appreciate. So that's about all I have to say. So I would love if there's any discussion or questions or comments or anything. Nobody has anything to say? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Kat.
You're muted.
Okay, I'm here. I just wanted to thank you for shining light on women in the time of the Buddha, and also, I mean, that and showing that it's not that centuries later women started to practice his teaching, to practice, you know, the way of meditation. Sometimes it feels like that. I can remember, you know, sitting in the Zen Center hearing story after story about the men of Buddha's time. And while they are inspiring and you know, there's a lot of teaching there, you start to wonder yourself, you know, where were the women? And so thank you so much, Myo On. I just, you know, I love the way you delivered it, and I very much appreciate the awareness of these women that were there. That's all I got.
And you know, his mother, Mahapajapati, was the one who kind of led the way. And she went to her son 3 times and wanted to be admitted as one of his disciples. And he kept saying no until Ananda had run into these 50 women who had traveled many, many miles, like maybe like 50 or 100 miles barefoot and the head shaved and ready to take a vow. And Ananda saw them and was like, what's happening here? And he had to go talk to the Buddha on the women's behalf and say, haven't you said that women can become enlightened just as a man can? And the Buddha said yes. But then he got some of his senior students together and they discussed the possibility of admitting women into this monastic order. And I think he was nervous about the men and the women interacting, you know, and living side by side. So part of the thing is that they had their own separate facilities, but that there were these 8 rules that, you know, from our perspective, and I think some from their perspective too, were kind of very confining to the women. Things like the ordained bhikkhus were were a bit above the women bhikkhunis, and the women always had to pay deference to the bhikkhus, whether the bhikkhu was half their age or this or that. And there were all these other rules they had to follow. There were 8. But they wanted to do this so much that they did it. But thank goodness they did it. And there was a wonderful monastic order that was formed by the women. And I really recommend reading this book. You could talk about anything, not just this, if there's something else on your minds. So Dokai-san, where are you? Are you on vacation?
I'm in Quito, Ecuador.
Ah, ah. And is it the same time as it is here, or?
Same time as Hokyoji is when we go on daylight saving time. I'll
I
show
see.
you a little picture. I don't know. Is that too bright or can you see?
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah. A little different than Hokyoji.
Yeah. Is it warm there? What have you been up to?
Actually, I'm having a little trouble with dizziness.
Oh,
Yeah, I had it when I was trying to get an appointment before I left home, but I couldn't get in to see the ENT specialist. But anyway, yeah, I've had it ever since I was sick with COVID, and it just hasn't. Every time if I look down and up this way, woo, it's like things start spinning around. And also in Quito, I have to carry a water stick, or not a walking stick,
oh,
because sometimes there's for some reason or another, they'll have these little steel things sticking out of the sidewalk, about 2 inches right in the middle of the sidewalk, little iron pegs. And then all of a sudden the sidewalk will drop, shift around. They're not nearly as level as our sidewalk. So I gotta put my little, like a blind person kind of feeling out the terrain in front of me, knowing how far it drops down, because of my vision problems. But anyway, I'm hoping it'll abate. I'm gonna do some online exercises for dizziness. I found you're supposed to have someone else teach you them, but it's getting a little bad. So we're gonna see if it works. So, but anyway, no, I'm doing fine. I'm happy. See, I've been adjusting for a couple of days. It's fairly warm, but I got a jacket on. Most people probably wouldn't be cool in my room right now, but I'm a little cool. It's too heavy of a jacket. I'm getting warm, but anyway, tomorrow I start Spanish lessons, so
oh,
I do that for 2 weeks, 4 hours a day, and hopefully I'll be able to say "Hola," hello, now Dios by the end of the 2 weeks. I can already say that, but anyway.
¿Cómo está usted?
Yeah, ¿cómo está usted? Sí, bueno. So, anyway, so
I took
that's
Spanish through college, but I have very little to show for it. But I could ask you how you are.
I've been studying for a long time, but I've never really gotten a hold of it. I never stay long enough to really get a hold of it. And then I forget it by the time I come back. So anyway.
I think Kat has her.
Dokai, I wanted to ask you about your studying Spanish every time you go abroad to a Spanish-speaking country. I know that you know more than you're letting on. So do you do that to pick up the dialect of the place you're in?
I think I do it just as something interesting to do when I'm away for 5 weeks. you gotta kind of make a program for yourself. If you're away for 5 weeks, just can't wander around from place to place. Either something, a volunteer program or something. So one of the things I do is study Spanish. Plus, it's kind of rewarding to be able to have a little conversation, with somebody in Spanish. The only problem is when I start, then the other person will respond, and then I can respond. But then they think I really do speak Spanish. So then so after about 3 or 4 exchanges, I start to lose it. I can't follow anymore. But but it's particularly enjoyable when you're in a taxi cab, and when the driver probably doesn't speak very much English most of the time. And so I'll start a little dialogue in Spanish, and then he or she does thinks I really do speak Spanish. So then they start really laying it on me, and I say, no, mi español es muy horrible,
Chiquito.
sí, muy horrible. And they say, oh, no, señor, es muy bueno, muy bueno. So I get a kick out of that. So, but anyway, yeah. So yeah. So it's nice. It gets frustrating. There's no way in the world I can understand two native people speaking together. It's like, or even the television. It's hard for you to grab the television too. News or something. But anyway, I'm taking online, not an online, but a DVD course, and the professor says, listen to like news stations, because they speak very slowly and clearly. I'm saying, what? You're saying they speak slowly? So anyway. But in movies, they'll start doing really rapid speaking, emotional or something. But anyway, that's my Spanish story.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
And I say hasta la pasta. So Dokai was just saying something about not wandering around aimlessly from place to place, and I think that's kind of what Yashodhara did. She was firmly within the household as her husband was wandering around from place to place.
I think it's pretty lonely or something if you're every few days you're just moving from one place to the other. You never, even if I'm in this hotel, I see the clerks, at least every day, and say, "Oh, ¿cómo está?" A little, or the waiters or something like that. So a little interconnection with people makes it more interesting.
So here's my question to all of you. So in your own lives, many of you who are householders, how does your practice manifest? Carl and Jim, I know you're there, I think. I know you're hiding behind the darkness there, but please feel free to pipe in.
One thing I notice at least in our particular practice, is I don't know that there is that much difference between an ordained person's life and a householder's life, at least the way we're doing it now. I have a car, I have a bank account, and travel some, and I think there are traditions, particularly maybe in the Theravadan tradition, where there's quite a bit of separation between an ordained person and the laity, household life. But I think we're a little hard pressed to see the difference in our own life, this life. Maybe, when you're an ordained person, maybe you have a little more opportunity to teach. It just comes your way if you're ordained. So, other than that, we don't, there's lay teachers who are just as sincere as ordained people. So I mean, I've been thinking about that for a long time, but and I'm still kind of hanging out in that place. So that's where I'm sitting with that.
How about for others of you?
Well, MyoOn, I think for all of us, our practice looks like we do. That there's whatever we're practicing, whether we're Buddhist practitioners, but I think how we treat others is a way that it manifests. Probably a way that we don't often reflect on is how we treat ourselves, how we take care of ourselves. Oftentimes, at least in my life, I think that I don't think about that very much, and really our ability, at least I find in my life, my ability to manifest compassion depends on how well I'm looking at what I need at any given point to be in balance. So I think that there's not so much a difference between lay people and ordained people, because we're neither purely one nor the other. But at the same time, the taking up of precepts and the commitment to practice is observable in others. It just is. And I think that's one of the most alluring things about Buddhism to me, as I practiced with people in my 20 or so years of practice, to see the changes in people, just how they think, how they interact, how they spend their time, etc. I appreciate that even though we probably don't have very much information about women practicing Buddhism. I mean, Yashodhara was royalty, as was Mahapajapati, so we're more likely to know a little bit about them that we wouldn't be able to necessarily access about women in general. But because we have little information, it makes it hard for that to necessarily be what we know about, So when we study, when we practice together, I think how women comport themselves in their own practice is probably the most vivid teaching. So I thank you for being one of those women, and I thank you for thinking to bring that forth. As we face just in life, I think both men and women struggle with this more consciously than they may have in the past, but it's not an easy situation, this one of the Buddha being asked to admit women to the practice. He did a lot of things that were not commonly accepted. I mean, he ignored caste, which was a biggie. And I can imagine we all need to bow to karma. We all need to bow to things as they are. And human beings don't change easily. And so as I am glad to have the information about the women in his life and in Buddhism, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful that I've had as much chance to be with and practice with women in Buddhism. It's still a difficult change to bring about. I mean, we get to observe that in our own lives. Both, for men who are committed to equality as well as women, there's a lot to learn about what that looks like and what the obstacles are. So I just appreciate that there's some amount of story that we can access, even though I think we have to imagine a lot of it into vividness as opposed to actually having the level of documentation, which is still limited, about the Buddha as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. What happens now?
What happens now is we talk about the future. So
The future.
Again, thank you. And next week, now do I even know who's coming up next week? Yes. Myo On is going to be giving us next week. And we have a little bit of springtime, which officially starts this coming week, I think it is. But we'll start having work weekends and caring for the land weekends and things happening about mid-April. So there are a lot of things to take a look at in our events. We've got a just sitting retreat. We've got the women's retreat in June coming up.
Women's retreat.
Very popular. It's getting more and more popular. And of course, we have Mother's Day and Father's Day.
and on Mother's Day, a number of us are going to go to St. Louis to be with somebody who's doing something.
That's right. Well, actually, we may be in St. Louis, but
yes,
the Alex is scheduled for ordination, and I'd like to say that although we're doing very well on the sewing, if you're here, we'll certainly be happy to have you make some stitches on his behalf. Anyway, yes, we've got a lot coming up. Right today, we've got a day that looks like spring. The robins have arrived and have been pecking about, and we've got some new deer that have been leaping about and having a good time being kids out here in the lawn. And then, it's Minnesota, so who knows what will come up and how much mud we'll get and how much snow we'll get and how cold it'll be. But we're up for the adventure. So
it's hard for me to believe it's grass there. There's so much snow up here in Minneapolis.
Well, you can see what has been grass. We don't actually have grass coming up, but we do have bugs. We do have lady beetles. They're very happy about the weather. So this is just Hokyoji as we know it. And we love having people visit. So come on down anytime. Although right now, we're doing construction in the workshop to equip it with amenities that it has not previously had, like heat and air conditioning and indoor bathing and facilities. You'll be happy to know that I asked for, and we are planning on putting in a bathtub in addition.
Oh, when can I come?
All right. So, as always, we do this practice together, and we rely on the great generosity of each of us. There is a link. I didn't succeed in getting it into the chat box, But there is a link where you can offer thanks through a monetary offering. We look forward to the offering of your time if you decide to come down and help us with work weekends and planning and caring for the land weekends. And we will close, as we always do, with our great vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. May your day go well. May the merit of this time together benefit all beings. See you next week, I hope.